So nice to see a sea of shining faces out here. Our readings are taken from the Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week is the Redeeming Light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The book of Isaiah in the Bible, chapter 9, tells us, "The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined." What is this light which so many scriptures speak of? In Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, we read of an early experience the Master had with that light. I was blessed about the age of 8 with a wonderful healing through the photograph of Lahiri Mahashaya. This experience gave intensification to my divine love. While at our family estate in Ichapur, Bengal, I was stricken with Asiatic cholera. My life was despaired of. The doctors could do nothing. At my bedside, Mother frantically motioned me to look at Lahiri Mahashaya's picture on the wall above my head. Bow to him mentally. She knew I was too feeble even to lift my hands in salutation. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared. I gazed at his photograph and saw there a blinding light enveloping my body and the entire room. My nausea and other uncontrollable symptoms disappeared. I was well. At once I felt strong enough to bend over and touch Mother's feet in appreciation of her immeasurable faith in her Guru. Mother pressed her head repeatedly against the little picture. "O omnipresent Master, I thank thee that thy light hath healed my son." I realized that she too had witnessed the luminous blaze through which I had instantly recovered from a usually fatal disease. "Where my light is," God once told a saint whom the divine light had healed, "no darkness can dwell." The divine light, pure, calm, liberating, is the only final cure for every kind of delusion, ill health, emotional grief, and spiritual ignorance. Seek it daily in the silence, in deep meditation. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 5th chapter, "For whom that darkness of the soul is chased by light, splendid and clear shines manifest the truth, as if a sun of wisdom sprang to shed its beams of light." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Good morning. For those who may not know, my name is Pavani. Is this working okay? Yeah. And this is my husband, Vajra. And it's our joy to be with you this morning. We'll both be sharing. Let me just get situated here. So, how do we stay in the light? As I was searching for inspiration on the subject, 3 hints particularly struck me. Look up, talk to Divine Mother about unimportant things, and remember grace. The topic of looking up also reminded me of a cartoon that I saw recently, and in Hatha Yoga there's a position called downward dog. And in this cartoon there was a group of dogs in yoga class. And they were all standing up on their hind legs like this. And their heads were bowed forward. And the caption read, "Downward human." But that's really the struggle, isn't it, that we all face every day? Whether the energy moves down into negativity, or whether it moves up and is positive and we're able to stay in the light. A few weeks ago, Naiswamis Jyotish and Devi were here, and someone commented on how the sweetness of their relationship and the sense of humor that they seem to have consistently. And they responded by saying that because of their schedule, which is traveling most of the year, they can't afford to be negative. And that really struck me. They wouldn't have the energy to do what they're doing if they allowed themselves to go into negativity. So, and it doesn't mean that they don't see things as they are. It doesn't mean that they don't say things to people that need to be said. It means that there's never a negative energy attached to it. So look up and stay positive. The second hint, talk to Divine Mother about unimportant things. It's easy to think that we should only talk to Divine Mother about important things, decisions and crises. And there's two stories in the autobiography of a yogi that give an example of a very sweet way to relate to Divine Mother. And it's the chapter on Master Mahashaya. And he's a saint that was a teacher to Yogananda when Yogananda was a boy. And they were walking together one day, and an acquaintance interrupted them. Yogananda described him as a conceited acquaintance who burdened us with a lengthy discourse. Sorry. So after a while, Master Mahashaya leaned over to Yogananda and he said, "I see this man doesn't please you. I have spoken to Divine Mother about it. She realizes our sad predicament. As soon as we get to yonder red house, she has promised to remind him of more urgent business." And sure enough, when they got to the red house, the man turned and departed. He didn't even finish his sentence and didn't say goodbye. And there was another example of Master Mahashaya invited Yogananda to a bioscope. Bioscope was an early version of the movies. And unfortunately, it ended up being a very dull lecture. And Yogananda didn't want to hurt the saint by showing his boredom. But after a while, the saint leaned over and he called Yogananda "Little Sir." He said, "I see, little sir, that you don't like this bioscope. I have mentioned it to Divine Mother. She is in full sympathy with us both. She tells me the electric lights will now go out and won't be relit until we have a chance to leave the room." And so the lights went out, and they made their gracious exit, and then the lights came back on. And Vajra and I have been having a lot of fun reading the autobiography before going to sleep. And when we recently read these two stories, it gave me a more courage and confidence to relate to Divine Mother in a different way, and to I mean, I do share with her a lot, but I realized there were some things that I was thinking that I needed to handle. I didn't want to bother her with that because I needed to handle it. And those stories gave me the courage to say, well, wait a minute. I can ask her to help me with those things. And it's been a very, very sweet practice that I highly recommend you trying. And that brings us to the third hint, which is remember grace. A devotee tells a story about many years ago being hit by a karmic test that caused her great distress and confusion. And she kept trying to mentally have the right attitude, and she did prayers and affirmations and gave it all to God. And after a few weeks, she had to admit, rather with discouragement, that neither the situation nor her attitude had changed. And she happened to run into Swami Kriyananda that day. And she told him how she'd been trying and asked his advice. And with great kindness and understanding, he said, all these techniques are useful because they draw God's grace. But ultimately, it's that grace that changes us. And she said from then on, she tried to tune into God's grace while doing her spiritual practices. And that it had been the missing piece that ultimately helped to free her from that karmic burden. And when I read that, I had an aha moment, realizing that all the practices we do, we have to put 100% into them, but really it's about drawing God's grace. And we think that we have to change ourselves, but it's the grace that's drawn that really changes us. So, what if in a moment, or a day, or a week, or a long, difficult phase, it's a struggle to even look up, or stay positive, or talk with Divine Mother, or remember grace? Here's some hope I found. It's a story from A Touch of Light, and it's about a family that was keeping 2 chrysalises, and that I had to look that up. It's the term for butterfly cocoon, but cocoon isn't really the correct term. And they were keeping them in a terrarium. They wanted to watch the process of the butterflies emerging. So the first one stirred and they see it was chewing its way out, and its little head came out. And then it proceeded to struggle and struggle to pull itself out of that tiny little hole. And when it came out, it was exhausted and its wings were limp. And it sat for a while, and then it started to pump fluid into its wings. And pretty soon, it expanded and became a beautiful monarch butterfly. So the second chrysalis started to open, and the children in the family felt sorry for this process and thought, well, we should help this butterfly. So they decided to put a little slit carefully in the chrysalis so that the butterfly could emerge without much effort. So the butterfly came out and it sat for a moment, and then it fell over lifeless. And what they realized was that the struggle was what gave the butterfly the strength to be able to move on to its further development. So what's the hope from this story? Even the struggle has value. I'd like to close with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. Bless me that I may perceive thee through the windows of all joyous activities. Look upon me and cheer me always as I engage in my daily duties. Let my every action, whether waking, sleeping, or dreaming, be sprayed by thy fountain of thy presence. God bless you.
let you. Well, I have Christmas tree notes all in red and green. The redeeming light. We're probably all familiar with the advice that is given when you're leaving the body at death, which is go towards the light, go towards the light. And it's good advice when you're leaving the body, and it's good advice all the time. And there's more to it than meets the eye. What we see, the light that we see with our human eyes is an extremely narrow sliver in the electromagnetic spectrum, which is like this big, and it includes X-rays and gamma rays and radio frequencies that our cell phones use and all kinds of things. And the visible light spectrum is like that much. That's what we see with our physical eyes. The eye of the soul, however, being free of material limitation, points to the expanded vision that is beyond what we see with our physical eyes. Yogananda described it in an experience in cosmic consciousness. It's been wonderful in this, the 70th anniversary year of the publishing of the autobiography of a yogi, to go through it. He describes when Sri Yukteswar struck him on the chest and he experienced the cosmic vision. My ordinary frontal vision was now changed to a vast spherical sight, simultaneously all perceptive. Through the back of my head, I saw men strolling far down Rai Ghat Road, and noticed also a white cow who was leisurely approaching. When she reached the space in front of the open ashram gate, I observed her with my two physical eyes. As she passed by behind the brick wall, I saw her clearly still. So that's the kind of vision we're talking about when we talk about seeing the light. Now, it's no surprise that somebody like Yogananda would have such experiences. He is, after all, an avatar, a God-realized master. But, and here I'm quoting from The Jewel in the Lotus, a play that Swami wrote, and I'll put in a plug here that Pavani and I and Jacob will be doing this play down at Spiritual Renewal Week at the Village, along with Devaki from Seattle, Lewis Howard, for those who know him, and Panduranga, the architect for the school, and out at Laurelwood. Anyway, come join us if you can. It will be great fun. The Jewel in the Lotus is really about a disciple search for Yogananda, and he talks about Yogananda saying that Yogananda played a more human role than most avatars. It was his task to awaken people in a culture, ours, where God communion had been all but forgotten. If he had spent his life in a Himalayan cave with cosmic visions, that wouldn't have done much to advance the spiritual awareness here in the West. We need our beliefs to be practical, to be down to earth, to be something tangible. And much of Yogananda's mission, as is said, more so than most masters, was on that practical, down-to-earth level, showing us how to work on that in this world. He demonstrated in spades, really, the practical application of the divine teachings. There was an interesting series of events in the autobiography that demonstrate different aspects of that human expression of the divine. It begins with the chapter where he meets his guru. He's in Benares at an ashram with his friend Jitendra, and they don't think much of meditation or his meditation practices, feeling that all outward service was really the way to God. Don't be so anxious to find God. So that didn't work so well, but in the course of his stay there, he encountered Sri Yukteswar out in the streets. He met him, saw him, realized that that was his guru, went up to him. They exchanged outward expressions of affection. "My own, you have come to me," was what Yukteswar said to him. And then they ran into a little bit of a clash. And it was curious because in my notes, I had written just before this little section, this discourse that they had between the two of them, a quote of Swami's, which is, "Most important of all is an attitude of loving receptivity toward the Christ consciousness through your true guru." So Yukteswar said to Yogananda, after exchanging all the pleasantries, "You should go back to Calcutta." That's where his family was. "Why exclude relatives from your love of humanity?" "Sir, I am not returning home, but I will follow you anywhere." Yukteswar, seeing the heart of the problem, "Do you think your relatives will laugh at you?" "I will not return." "You will return in 30 days. Never." In that moment, Master was demonstrating something other than loving receptivity. And he left it at that. He bowed at his feet and they went their ways. That was it. Interesting, isn't it? What he's showing there. Well, he left the ashram with Jitendra and they went on to Agra, where his older brother was, because Jitendra wanted to see the Taj Mahal. And in the midst of this, the visit with his brother was giving him a hard time about his commitment to the search for the divine. And they had a conversation where his brother said, "So you feel quite independent of Father's wealth?" And Yogananda replied, "I am conscious of my dependence on God." Words are cheap. What a plight if you were forced to look to the invisible hand for your food and shelter. You would soon be begging in the streets. Never. There's that word again. He was a stubborn sort. He said he attracts stubborn disciples too. "I would not put faith in passers-by rather than God. He can devise for his devotee 1,000 resources besides the begging bowl." Well, Ananta decided to put it to the test and settle this once and for all. So he proposed that he put Jitendra as a witness and Yogananda on the train and send them to, where was it? Brindaban. Two Penniless Boys in Brindaban. It's a chapter in the autobiography. Now here were the conditions. You must not take a single rupee. You must not beg, either for food or money. You must not reveal your predicament to anyone. You must not go without your meals, and you must not be stranded in Brindaban. Yogananda immediately took him up on it, without hesitation, not the slightest hesitation. Such was his commitment to Divine Mother. Not only that, he did it one better. When he was offered help at every opportunity, he refused it. Without soliciting it, people came to him and said, I see that you are two devotees. Come with us. We'll provide you food and shelter. No, sir. This is none of your business. We'll have nothing to do with it. They had to take him by the arm and drag him. He wanted to make absolutely sure that when he got back to Ananta, it was beyond question that this was the work of Divine Mother and nobody else. He got back, having fulfilled all the conditions. It's a wonderful chapter to see how Divine Mother supported him. Ananta was so stunned that he asked Yogananda then and there to become for Ananta to become Yogananda's disciple, which is unheard of in India, that an older brother would ask to be a disciple of a younger brother, and received Kriya initiation on the spot. Well, from there, Jitendra decided that they were both headed to Benares, where Sri Yukteswar's ashram, and Jitendra got cold feet, decided he didn't want to go through with it, so Yogananda went on alone. And he returned. "You will return to me in 4 weeks," was the other thing that Yukteswar said to him. Yogananda arrived in Benares, and as he was coming to the ashram, he realized that this was the 28th day. So, in the meantime, he had realized that this was his true guru, and he needed to offer his unconditional obedience to him. He took his advice, went back to Calcutta in exactly 30 days, as Yukteswar had said. Yukteswar wanted him to get a college degree in Calcutta so that when he came to the West, people would be more open to him. This stranger from India with long hair needed credentials to get a foot in the door here in the West. In his later years, one of Yogananda's disciples, having been given some advice to take on something that was rather challenging, responded to him by saying, "It's easy for you, you're a master." And Yogananda's response was, "And how do you think I got to be a master?" Yogananda had more than his share of challenges in his life. And he had his good days and his more difficult days. But the one thing that never wavered was that his was a life lived for God. And if what we're seeking is to draw that light of redemption, there's no better way than to follow his example. Have some music.